To bring this January 18th work session to order. And we have first up a work session on the urban growth boundary.
Thank you, Mayor. And as you know, this is ongoing work. And so I'll turn it over to Terry and her team to take us through this next step.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor Vinnis. Welcome. I'm delighted to be here with you and city councilors to talk about adopting our urban growth boundary. We are at a turning point in this process that feels pretty good from a staff standpoint, at least. Last Friday, city staff submitted our urban growth boundary proposal to the state of Oregon. So that marks a turning point and the beginning of our formal adoption process for our urban growth boundary. So today, here we go. We're going to have a very brief explanation of what brought us to this point. And then Emily is going to go into some more detail about the adoption process for you. And then she'll turn it back over to me to go through our proposed community engagement plan for this phase of work. And we'll wrap up with some next steps. So the Envision Eugene community process began in 1912. Just kidding.
Feels like it, sure.
It kind of feels like it. But it has been a long process. We began with the House bill in 2007, and we had a robust phase of community visioning after that House bill was passed, shown here. We moved into a phase of strategy refinement for about another year, where we talked about different ways that we could meet the city's needs as we grow. That resulted in the March 2012 vision document, which had the 7 pillars in it and various strategies for accommodating our next 20 years of growth. At the same time, we analyzed whether we would need to expand the urban growth boundary, the UGB analysis work, and you as a council adopted efficiency measures, which are ways the city can add more capacity for jobs or housing inside the existing urban growth boundary. We did all of that work and moved into the most recent phase of work has been refining our multifamily housing strategies. And that has been done over the last year, resulting in a decision at this table in October, selecting how the city was going to address those multifamily housing needs, the last little bit of multifamily housing. So we're now at the beginning of the formal adoption process, and we'll explain what that means and what the next steps are over the course of this presentation. What our intent is today is to be clear with you about your expectations for what this next phase of the process looks like. That's why we're coming to you and asking you to approve this process and the engagement plan around it. So this graphic is in your packet. It's the timeline going forward from today, and I understand it's hard to read on the screen, but it is in your packet and available on our website. The intention here is to provide the City Council with the opportunity to act on the urban growth boundary before you go on your summer break at the end of July. So that's the goal at the end. Oops. The end here is Eugene's new UGB that gets set with your local action, and working backwards to the beginning of the year, we've built the process to get us there. The complete urban growth boundary adoption package will be on our website this week. Our community information sessions start tomorrow, and the Planning Commission work sessions start this coming Monday. We'll kind of work through the Planning Commission process from January through April, and then it comes back to you with the Planning Commission recommendation in May. So that's when your work sessions would begin. Once your final local action is taken, the UGB must be acknowledged by the state to become official. So with that as a framework, Emily's going to walk you through some more details about the forthcoming process.
Thanks, Terry.
So for the few of you who may not know, I'm Emily Jerome. I'm in the city attorney's office. I'm an assistant city attorney, and I've been working for a long time on the urban growth boundary project. So happy to be here today, and always available for you should you have any questions or comments about the process. So I was asked today to talk a little bit about the approval process, the proposed timeline for that, and the process as it relates to state law. And the proposal in front of you is a way that we see for you to make a final decision before your summer break that complies with all the requirements of state law. And I'm going to give you just a really high-level orientation to sort of that state law and the process today. So as a reminder, we are here largely because in 2007, the legislature told Eugene and Springfield that they needed to separate what had always been a shared urban growth boundary, and that they needed to do so by drawing a line down I-5 to create that separation. The state has very, very rigid laws in terms of state statutes, administrative rules, and 19 statewide planning goals, and also some court cases that tell cities pretty precisely how you go about establishing an urban growth boundary or adding land to an urban growth boundary. In large part, it's based around the idea that an urban growth boundary has to have a 20-year supply of land to meet that jurisdiction's needs for housing, for employment land, for parks, and for schools. And at the council's direction in 2007, city staff set out to study the current supply and the 20-year demand between 2012 and 2032 for that purpose. Since that time, the city council and many of you have walked through lots and lots of issues related to building those studies and making those determinations. And as Terry said, you're now ready to begin the formal adoption process. And that's what we tend to call this part of the process, the formal adoption process. So this proposal that's been developed over these many years has been developed in basically two parts. One relates to jobs, parks, and schools. The other relates to housing. And the proposal in front of you is a timeline that would keep those two packages in lockstep with one another in terms of when they're being addressed by the planning commissions, the public, and the council. So the first package of actions is the one related to jobs, parks, and schools. In this package, you would establish a precise location for the urban growth boundary. You would add land based on the studies that show that even after all the measures that you've taken to efficiently use land inside the UGB, that the supply of land can't meet our 20-year needs. So it would add land for employment, for a couple of parks, and for one school. Other studies in the package show where that land would be. And in this package, because of the actions involved in it, state law requires joint approval by you and the county. And the proposed process would have work sessions with both the Eugene Planning Commission, Lane County Planning Commission, joint hearing and recommendations, and Eugene City Council and Lane County Board of Commission work sessions, a joint hearing, and decisions. The other package relates to residential land, and for housing, the studies show that after the measures that the City Council has proposed to take or has already taken, the supply of land in the UGB can meet our 20-year needs. For that reason, the adoption process is simpler, but keeping in lockstep, there would also be a work session at the Eugene Planning Commission, public hearing before the Planning Commission, recommendation to you, and again, council work sessions, hearing, and final action right alongside with the employment, parks, and school package. So if approved, the formal consideration by the planning commissions would begin right away, with planning commissions scheduled for March 7th public hearings. So the last thing I'd like to note for you, because some of you who've been around the block a little bit may be wondering, These actions are actually legislative in nature and not quasi-judicial. What that really means to you is that because staff are now in the next couple of weeks, going to be sending out some notices, you may be hearing more from constituents who are interested in this project. Because this is legislative in nature, you can talk with them. There are no ex-parte contact legal issues for us to be concerned with. I will tell you that you're urged by your staff and all involved in the process to encourage those folks to, in addition to talking to you, go to the Envision Eugene website and submit their comments as formal testimony on the record so that the planning commissioners and your colleagues on the council can also hear their viewpoints and they can be considered as the proposal is considered and deliberated upon. So Terry's going to talk to you a little bit more about an additional proposal for community engagement between now and the time the public hearings happen with the planning commissions.
Thank you. So for community engagement in this process, as you know, it's been really a cornerstone, designing ways that we hope are effective of reaching people at every stage of the process. So as we enter into the formal adoption process, we will continue doing the most effective ways that we've communicated with people over the course of the project. And those include lots of information on our website, envisioneugene.org, sending out regular newsletters to a list of over 650 people, and videos. So at this point, I would like Beth to back out of the PowerPoint and play you our latest video, which is about the adoption process.
Eugene is a great place to live, and this is an exciting time for our city. As part of a project called Envision Eugene, our community developed a vision that seeks to preserve and enhance the things we love about living here. And we are ready to take a big step forward in making that vision a reality. But we need your help. Like all cities in Oregon, Eugene needs to have an urban growth boundary, or UGB, with enough space for 20 years worth of homes, jobs, parks, and schools. After more than 5 years of community engagement and technical analysis, we are ready to officially adopt our own UGB, and we want your feedback as we take this next step. The UGB adoption package includes a number of important parts. It includes the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan, with policies governing how land in Eugene is used, transportation investments, economic development, and how we will monitor growth and change moving forward. It also includes the UGB itself, with 2 modest expansions for jobs, parks, and a school. The proposed UGB expansions reflect what hundreds of community members have said that they value: balancing economic development and access to services with the protection of surrounding farm and forest land. We can accommodate all of our housing needs inside the current UGB. This will be done by increasing housing downtown and in areas already planned for medium-density housing, like apartments and condos. Planning along our key transportation corridors will still be an important part of Envision Eugene, providing opportunities for better building design, more complete and walkable neighborhoods, and more housing opportunities as our community continues to grow. It's important for the future of our city that every community member has a chance to participate in this final step, the formal UGB adoption process. There will be 2 sets of public hearings locally, one with the City and County Planning Commissions, and then a second with the City Council and Lane County Board of Commissioners. The City and County Planning Commissions will make a recommendation on UGB adoption, and the City Council and County Board of Commissioners will make the final decision. You are encouraged to speak at these public hearings, whether in favor or against aspects of the proposal. You can also submit comments and questions by email to envisioneugene@ci.eugene.or.us. The UGB proposal establishes a solid plan for how we will grow as a community while keeping Eugene an awesome place to live, work, and play. Now is your opportunity to influence the final decision. Visit www.envisioneugene.org, where you can find the latest information about the adoption process and review all of the adoption package materials. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Beth. So that video is available on our website and social media, and seems to be a good way to reach folks who just have a little bit of time to learn about what's going on and engage with them in a more visual way. So if we could get the PowerPoint back up. There we go. Thank you, Beth. In addition to those ongoing methods of communication, we're holding a series of community information sessions. The first one is tomorrow. These are designed to be in every part of the city. So they're at the high schools, in the library, and at the downtown library. And again, all of the dates and locations, addresses, and things are on the website. Counselors are very welcome to attend these meetings. I would love it if you would contact me so that we could have a counselor or two at each of these meetings. That would be great. Another thing that is proposed in the community engagement plan draft before you is to loop back with the underrepresented groups that we did outreach to over the summer. So you might recall we told you about this outreach in October. After learning that our questionnaires and more traditional outreach methods were missing significant portions of our community, we did some additional targeted outreach to the Latino community, younger members of our community, and also lower income people. And we worked with a local outreach firm to do that work. And what we're proposing to do now is to circle back with them and let them know what decision you made in October about multifamily housing, and then bring them up to date on the formal adoption process and how they can engage with that. Third thing that we're planning to do is attend existing group meetings. An example of this is the Neighborhood Leaders Council, which is next Tuesday. Staff will be attending that and providing some information to the neighborhood leaders on how they can engage and how they can engage their associations. We've also developed a community guide on the urban growth boundary proposal that we'll be making available to groups to use at their own meetings. So those are some of the highlights of the community engagement plan. And when we get to your discussion, we're asking for you to approve it so that we can implement it. Of course, if there's anything you'd like to add or change, we'd love to know. Finally, these are the next steps. This is just a summary of some of the things that will be happening in the community before we come back to you with the Planning Commission's recommendations. So again, work sessions and community meetings for the next 2 months, and then the public hearing, for which the notices will be going out fairly soon, is scheduled for March 7th here in this room in Harris Hall. And planning commissions would deliberate during the month of April, and then we would come back to you for work sessions starting in May, and your public hearings would be the night of June 27th. That is it.
Okay, so my understanding is we have two separate things to vote on, and suggesting that we start with the first one first, and then we'll have a motion, and then open for discussion, unless there are questions that people need to ask before we do that, and it looks like there are. Okay, so I have Mike, Claire, and Emily in the queue. Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Forgive my voice, please. Thank you very much for the presentation. First question, industrial, residential, is dual track approval or single track approval?
They're on the same timeline, but separate procedures. So there will be a hearing planning commission work sessions that address one and then the other, separate public hearings, same night.
Separate votes, but same
Separate votes, yeah.
time. Sorry. The new TSP will be a part of the comp plan that we're approving, yes?
Yes, but we have not proposed very specific amendments to that plan because we want to make sure that you guys like what you see and have adopted it first. Once, and assuming you all have adopted the new plan, we will amend that plan. If for some reason you choose not to, we'll amend the current plan. But in any case, transportation, accommodating the actions that you're taking through the UGB with transportation will occur. Just depending on which plan is in place at the time.
Lastly, sorry, I was aware of the potential for citizen challenge over specific issues with regard to clear and objective standards. Did that take place? If not, why not? And if it did, what's the outcome? And if not, do you plan to have that completely wrapped up by approval time and done, I suppose, the changes to clear and objective standards?
The clear and objective standards updates are, you gave us direction on the timing of that work in July 2015, I want to say. There was a series of actions associated with residential, and that work is to occur following a local adoption of the urban growth boundary.
My recollection of that was that I had mentioned and been told that those would be completed in advance of our vote to approve the final UGB package, and it will be important to me in order to garner my yes vote that they are done. So I will probably want to revisit and talk about that. Thank you.
Claire?
Yeah. Well, I think in general, your outreach plan looks very good. I saw an ad in the Register Guard announcing the meeting, so that was nice to see. And I just wanted to ask if you can tell me how many individuals were reached through those efforts to reach the underserved communities, about how many folks were engaged there. And if you don't have that answer right off the top of your head.
Heather says about 50.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Emily?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It was helpful. If we already have enough space for the housing, what are we approving of for an urban growth boundary? If we're not expanding it, what's in that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in order to, it would be a study that demonstrates that. It's a study that identifies the supply of land in 2012. It looks at the actions, it determines the demand between 2012 and 2032, kind of does the math there. It looks at the actions that the city council has taken and intends to take with this process to more efficiently use land and increase the supply. It sort of goes through the whole analysis that demonstrates that in the end of the study, the buildable lands inventory for residential land is sufficient to meet the demand that's addressed in an earlier portion of the study. So the state requires us to demonstrate that we have enough, and that's why it's not part of an expansion area.
Okay, great. The other part, it says employment, does that mean industry land?
Yeah, employment is studied under the law in terms of commercial and industrial land, both. Commercial land through actions that the council took and some new designations that were created by the council several years ago. Commercial land is satisfied inside the UGB. For that reason, the expansion relates only to industrial land, and so that's what you see in the proposed packet.
What consideration is being given to the really good ag land in that area?
A lot. That was one of the more difficult parts of the process. The state has a very, has a very precise way that you have to look at all the land around your urban growth boundary. And what's normally a good thing, which is that we're surrounded by really good farmland, is very difficult when you have to expand. There are not a lot of good options. And so there's a really intense analysis of all the land, including which land is prime farmland. And you have to, under the law, do everything you can to not go there. And so the proposal does everything it can to not go there. It takes as little as possible. And we'd be happy to send you a link if you want to look a little closer at that. That'll obviously be part of what the commission is looking and making a recommendation on, and ultimately you'll be looking at and making a decision on.
So is this already decided, already written up as to where the boundary will be and which lands will be included? Or is the public input and the council work sessions, will there be changes made in response to those comments?
There absolutely can be changes made. It's difficult because you have to have a proposal to consider. And there are so many moving parts and pieces and sort of a house of cards, if you will, as to how these plans come together. So that's why there have been so many work sessions with the Planning Commission and the council leading up to this point to just put those studies together. What will be before the Planning Commission, assuming you all vote to approve the process today, is the package that demonstrates where, an area that would accommodate the need for the industrial land and for the parks and the school, based on a pretty in-depth analysis. That'll all be part of the proposal. It is the purpose of this process at this point is to get formal comment on it, although you've all received a lot of comment and provided a lot of direction already. So it certainly can change, and the reason for soliciting comment is to get, if somebody sees an error in that analysis or something that should be done differently or given more thought, we want to hear that, and we could certainly react to that.
I'd like to add one thing to that, and that is that there are some pieces of the overall package that are newer, that attempt to implement the direction that the council has given us over the last several years. And those include the overlay zone that is proposed for the Clear Lake expansion area. So it regulates uses, it excludes certain uses, it requires additional buffers, it does things like that to try to minimize impacts from the expansion. And we absolutely want and need comments on that overlay zone. Another newer piece is the comprehensive plan policies. And the third one is the multifamily code amendments that we were given direction to write in October, but have not been vetted through public review yet. So there are some components that we've created to implement your direction, and now it's time for the public to comment on them.
So if somebody, the public or us, doesn't like a part of it, does that set it way back? How do you accommodate that? If we decide we don't want to approve it, you said something about amending the present plan, so I'm not quite sure what that means.
So I think it was in the context of the transportation question that I talked about amending the present plan. In terms of if there are portions of the proposal that Planning Commission or ultimately the council doesn't like or wants to change, that can be done. Maybe. I mean, the changes can definitely be made. What's before you is not, it's here for discussion, and it's here for your consideration. There are fundamental aspects that can sort of unravel other aspects. So what we try to do is help you understand the implications of changes that you might be interested in and help work through addressing those in a way that would still allow you to adopt an urban growth boundary. And we've worked through lots and lots of those in more of a discussion way leading up to this proposal. But by all means, the purpose of this is to get that review. In terms of amending the present plan, that actually has to do with the fact that right now you're about to begin reviewing an update to the transportation plan. And we didn't want to presuppose future amendments to a plan you haven't even adopted yet. So that's why in this project, we're waiting to specify the amendments. We know what projects would be needed in these expansion areas. We don't know whether to say in the ordinance we're amending the current plan, or whether by the time we get to you with this action, we'll be amending a new plan that you adopt in the next few months. Does that make sense?
Yeah, as far as the timeline goes, if there's a lot of concerns, that has the potential to push this more into the summer or fall. Back to the housing question, I've heard that we do have room inside the urban growth boundary for the housing, but I was talking to the realtors last week, and they seem to think that there is not enough room and would like to expand towards LCC to put in more housing. So what's the opinion on that?
You want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. While this action of setting our urban growth boundary responds to our study that has the conclusion that says we can meet those 20-year needs inside, the council has also given staff direction to immediately begin a growth monitoring program to track almost real time the consumption of land and the trends that are affecting the consumption of land. So that will be put in place by your adoption of the comprehensive plan. There are growth monitoring policies in there and a program that will be established. The other thing to know is that the next phase of planning for growth beyond 20 years will also begin as soon as we adopt this urban growth boundary. And you've directed us to start studying urban reserves, which is a longer term look of 50-year land supply, which would consider, again, the whole area surrounding Eugene based on what we gathered through this process as a starting point. So those would begin after we get this piece done.
One concern I've had is how advertising and dissemination of information about the ways to comment. I read the Register Guard. I see the ads more likely than the little tiny city calendar. I know many people do not have internet access. There's the list up by our office, but I'm wondering how else word has gotten out to many people. 50 people to me doesn't really seem like a lot. How do we make sure that people do know both the question sessions and the hearings?
Great question. We do everything we can think of. And so the biggest asset that we have found is existing groups who have their own networks. So we work with the neighborhood associations, community groups that represent certain parts of the community, ask them to put it in their newsletters and on their websites or in personal conversations if that's how they get together. But we really learned something after putting out surveys through online and kind of more traditional ways of advertising. We really learned who we were not reaching, which is why we devised the additional outreach to the underrepresented groups over the summer. So that's fairly new for this project, but we hope to continue that more and build it into earlier phases of projects in the future. And the more we learn, the better we get at that. If you have ideas, I'd love to sit down.
I do have ideas, and I think that this is really important, not just for this subject, but for everything, because we're here to hear what the people want. This has been very helpful. I have one other comment, that in looking at the slides, I recognized almost all of them, and they're all downtown. So I would like to see some more attention put to infill and more housing in the other nodes. Thank you.
Alan.
So, I think Chris was in. One of the concerns that on both sides of the fence of this issue has been that this is a huge decision that cannot be changed for 20 years, and that we're baking in wrong assumptions. And that's something to be concerned about, and that's totally locked in. So what we've done is to build into this process the ability to start almost immediately in the urban reserves and the other processes that we've got that will be part of this adoption package to start to look at those things almost immediately with a promise that within 5 years we would look at all of this again and keep looking at it almost on a real-time basis. Obviously, we can't keep changing the urban growth boundary all the time because it's such a cumbersome process. But we still will be looking at that on a regular basis. So all those assumptions that people think may be wrong, we'll be looking at them right away and updating them and making sure that they're incorporated in that. And maybe Terry, Emily, you can comment on that concept and expand on it a little bit more and try to alleviate the fears of some people that we're baking in wrong assumptions into this, and that this is irrevocable for the next generation.
Yes, it has been a source of ongoing concern in the community as the process does take a certain amount of time. So our planning period runs from 2012 to 2032. And until we adopt the urban growth boundary, we don't get to start looking at a different planning period because we don't have an adopted baseline. So that's been a motivation, I think, to finish this phase, but also a source of concern because as our economy has changed and the housing market has changed a lot in the last 5 years, people have been asking really good questions. How do we account for that? How do we really know what the future split between multifamily and single family is going to be? And that's one of the key things we'll begin and are already monitoring in our growth monitoring program. What else to say about that? I didn't mention that we'll be setting up a technical advisory committee to advise staff on that program, and that they will assist with the monitoring reports and analysis of the data, and then that will be brought to the council on actually a shorter timeline than you mentioned, Ellen. It would be within 3 years of acknowledgement of the UGB, you'd have your first review of the information.
Yeah, and maybe also comment on the interconnectedness of all of this. So a couple of months ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, we had a conversation about a couple of the different metrics. And what I realized from that process is they're all very intertwined. Just saying this one needs to be adjusted has ripple effects through the whole process. And there were just a couple of things that we were looking at that made us almost start completely over. Maybe you could review that process again, since it's such a long process, and talk about that interconnectedness, and which all leads me to believe that given that and the fact that we built in this process to look at it almost immediately and then come back to it in 3 years means that let's get it done and then start working on the update. So maybe you can talk about the interconnectedness and what that means, throwing it all back to ground zero almost.
One of the most basic assumptions of the plan is our population forecast. And so that was a really key piece of information to get your approval on what number to use and what time frame to use. And we did that. And we're sticking with that for all of the analysis. It runs through all of the housing analysis and is connected in an abstract way to the jobs analysis as well. So that is about 34,000 people over the next 20 years, over the 20-year planning period, and relates pretty closely to the issue of housing mix. So housing mix is another assumption based on trends and data and what's reasonable to expect as far as shifting the city's housing stock. A lot of council discussion over it at various committees and things, but that council direction was given in 2012, and it underlies a lot of the conclusions in our housing needs analysis ultimately. So if that were changed, it would be a new analysis. Same with the population figure. Does that get at what you're asking?
Meaning that we would basically have to start over.
Right. It starts.
And set us back 2 years probably.
Yes.
Or more. More because we'd have to replace the entire planning staff because they'd all quit because they wouldn't want to do this again.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that part of the reason that it has taken so long in this case is that we weren't really in a position to act very quickly. We had not been collecting the kind of information necessary to present you with these studies very quickly. That's changed. And the intent to look at these, what's actually happening through monitoring and to react to that is not going to be the same thing again. You're poised to take action should action be necessary, because we learn that population's growing much faster, which is what a lot of people are telling us, or that we are seeing a different housing mix. Reacting to that will not be another 10-year endeavor.
I'm going to let Chris go next, and then Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, I can recall back when 3337 passed and we began this process, we were optimistically saying it'll be a couple of years. And there was impatience over this being a couple of years. But and that's not a complaint about how long it's taken for all the reasons that Emily just stated. It took a long time to assemble the parts, which is what's inherently challenging with where we are now is we make the assumptions at the beginning of the process. And then by the time you get to the plan, the assumptions are incorrect. And we know many of them are incorrect. We're going into this knowing they're incorrect, but to correct them means we have to start all over again. And that gets to the point I wanted to make. Ed Moore from the state was here to talk with us about the state's role in this and the very specific regulations we have to operate under. And the impression I got from him was the state is already exercising a great deal of patience with Eugene in terms of not having established our urban growth boundary or turned in our plan yet. And the impression I got from him was that patience is not endless. And that if you decide, oh, you know what, this isn't right, we need to go back and rethink it, and it's going to take another year or two or whatever, the state may at some point say, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to just endlessly run around in a circle because the assumptions require replanning and the replanning requires new assumptions, and you just keep, it's okay, you can do this for the next 10 years. They will step in at some point and say, legally, you are required to do this. And if you won't do it, we will do it. He didn't say that directly, but in my conversations with him, that's been the implication. So with regard to the timeline, I think we're at the point where we need to be open and we need to hear what people have to say, and we need to be responsive to make adjustments to this plan that need to be adjusted. But I'm worried that if we start making major changes to the assumptions, which then force us to go back and redo major parts of the plan, while that may be perfect in terms of trying to achieve perfection in the plan, it will trigger some unfortunate consequences that we really don't want to see triggered. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'd rather go forward with a plan that's 85% there, 90% there, than to try to seek 100% and have somebody else come in and do it for me.
Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. When you're doing the ongoing monitoring, will we be doing ongoing monitoring of surrounding communities? So in other words, if Eugene in the next 3 years slows down to a 0.8 single family growth, annual growth, but Veneta and Springfield and Junction City are all at 1.7 or what have you, we'll be able to make some comment about shifting demands based on our actions. Will we be doing that level of analysis of the surrounding area as well?
We'll certainly coordinate with them, but the way the population forecasts are set up, specific to housing need, is that Portland State University now issues these to each city, whereas the previous system kind of had a sharing system at the county level. So under the new statutes, the way the populations are allocated to each city, it kind of forces cities to do their own planning, although we very much value regional coordination and regional planning. And so it's kind of both.
I'm saying that what we do absolutely affects how other surrounding communities grow, and I'd like to see us make wiser decisions than I think we've made for the last 30 years. So what I'm saying is, will we be actively trying to come up with the answer to the question, what are our decisions having as an effect on surrounding communities? Will we be answering that question?
I think it's a good question, and so let us take a look at that. I don't know if we are or not. What I hear you saying is part of the monitoring purpose is to understand how the policies and that you've established impact our growth, but also, in addition, how it impacts others' growth. And so let us take a look at that. I don't know if we've.
I think that as we decide to be a great deal more dense, we may be encouraging leapfrog sprawl. Now, that's my opinion. So I would like to be able to know 3 years from now or 5 years from now, is that in fact the case? Have we seen much greater single-family development in outlying areas as a result of us deciding to go 55-45? I want to be able to answer that question. Secondly, or lastly, I guess, I asked Ed a really important question when he was sitting here. I asked him if the fact that we haven't expanded our UGB for single-family residential in over 30 years, and that we're not recommending to do it this time, if that's in keeping with the spirit of Senate Bill 100 and the reason that Oregon has land use planning. And his answer was no. So when this comes back for adoption, I'm hoping that you can help me understand why what you're suggesting we approve is in keeping with the spirit of Senate Bill 100 and is in keeping with the idea of appropriate land use planning, because the guy from the state said the idea of us not expanding for over 30 years isn't in the spirit. Thank you.
Betty, and then I think we're looking at time and we should address the motions that we have to vote on. So one more comment.
Thank you. I don't think we should act as if the state is our grandfather or something. I believe in home rule. And my question is, if we vote yes today to send this to the Planning Commission, does that make it almost impossible to change anything?
The motions that you're looking at today are merely related to process, a process that planning staff will then try to maintain to get you in a position to take action according to this timeline. Nothing substantive whatsoever.
Well, too often we say they spent a lot of time on it, therefore we have to do what they said we have to do, which is not the way I think it should be. And I'm concerned about the industrial expansion. The idea is to make room for jobs, isn't it? And as more and more jobs take less and less space, the kinds of jobs that people are doing, I wonder if we really need to do that. Also, I wonder if if we're going to have public hearings, we should be willing to change as a result of the public hearings. And sometimes I think we say it's all been decided, and you can just come and tell us what you think, but we will do what we decided. And I hope that if we're having public hearings and we get new ideas or new information or a new way of looking at it, that we'll be able to change without saying the state told us to do this, whatever. I think we should, if the state is bossing us around, we should find a way to destabilize that or something. I think we should decide what's best. Also, I have a question, and this is a general question. Could we ever say that agricultural land is set, that you can't ever change that? We talk about being independent, reducing the carbon footprint. We need food sources close to us. And and those are the industries that we really need to protect, the ones that we need to live.
One of the things so we've talked about looking into urban reserves as a next step after this process is done. One of the things that the state has allowed in the metro area, and Lane County has at various times expressed interest in, is the idea of rural reserves. in the process of selecting where you might grow in the long-term future, you would also be reserving land upon which you will never grow. And that's something that we've certainly had discussions with county staff about, and I've heard the commissioners talk about. So it's not lawful. Lane County lacks the power to do it right now under state law, but I think if local jurisdictions, the urban areas like cities, are interested in our county doing that, it's something they could talk about. But we do have an obligation under state law right now to accommodate growth. And the growth that is coming, we're required to accommodate the growth that the population forecasts say we're going to have. And as we are surrounded by agricultural land, we have very few options besides, growing inside more densely and moving out onto the land that surrounds us. And in some cases, it is agricultural land. So it's not it's not an easy position to be in.
Maybe we should change the state laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. And I just do want to kind of reiterate that this is a public process. There's an ongoing conversation to review this and encourage the counselors to be part of the community meetings that are coming forward. That would be helpful. And also to suggest that you as counselors have contacts with people in your wards, which may not be apparent in the groups that the staff know, and that you can share that information with staff also to kind of expand the reverberating conversations through the community, and that would be helpful. So we have two motions. These are process motions. They're not the substance. They are, and the first one, I will turn to Council President.
I move to approve the timeline and process set on attachment A, which is this document, although it's not identified as attachment A.
Second.
Second, is there any discussion? Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll vote no, and the only reason is because, and I don't by any stretch think I'll be in the majority doing that, but I just want to say, for me, it's because we had a very clear choice at council about choosing the 34th, about a year and 18 months ago, between choosing the old 34,000 number, which we knew to be wrong, and the 40,000 number that we know from PSU is the more accurate one, and I would suggest it's even higher than that, both then and now. I was told that to choose the 34 was a more expeditious choice, but also that we would clean up some of the errors in the process. And I was told that we would have the clear and objectives standards piece done before we got to approval, if I was willing to go along with the $34,000 number, which is why I did. And as I know we're not going to get that done, I can't support the timeline until we do. Thank you.
Any other comments? All in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, are we missing someone? Or am I not counting?
Greg.
Oh, Greg.
Greg's missing.
6 in favor and 1 opposed. Okay, passes. All right, the second motion.
I move to approve the community engagement activities for the UGB adoption package as described in attachment B.
Second.
Second, sorry.
Any discussion? All in favor? All 7, no opposed. It passes. Thank you. Thank you all. Welcome. And for our second part of this work session, we're talking about the implementation of the Oregon minimum wage. So turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. I'm Christy Hammett, Central Services Director. I'm joined today by Becky DeWitt, who's a Program Manager in our Human Resources Division. And the The work session is in response to council requests to discuss the options and impact if city council were to consider adopting a higher minimum wage for city employees, contractors, and temporary employees at the time. Subsequent to the original poll, the state legislature passed a tiered minimum wage structure, increasing the minimum wage for the state. So today, the purpose of our work session is to update council on the implementation of the state legislative changes, provide an overview of our temporary workforce, as well as the budget impacts for the state-approved changes, and then a couple of what-ifs that answer some of the questions from the original poll. And so we'll provide a little bit more information. While the core purpose of our presentation will focus on the legislative impacts. There'll be some financial data. Becky will provide a lot of information about how we utilize the skills and talents of our contingent workforce and how important that workforce is to addressing peak periods and providing services that are accessible and available to our community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Becky.
Thank you, Christy. So the 2016 legislative session passed Senate Bill 1532, which enacts a series of minimum wage increases through 2023 and established a mechanism for increases beyond that. It did establish a tiered system, and Eugene and Lane County fall within the standard tier. The first increase became effective July 1st of 2016. This gives you a little bit more information in detail about the legislation and the provisions within it. Again, Eugene and Lane County fall within the standard tier and has increases of increments of about 50 cents up until July 1 of 2020, and then the increases are 75-cent increments. Following July of 2023, the minimum wage will increase additionally based upon CPI. Employers in the Portland metro area are subject to a higher minimum wage increase over time, and employers in non-urban counties are subject to a lower minimum wage increase over time. One of the things that we like to make sure that we do anytime we have a new piece of legislation is to take a look at what those impacts would be to our current city employees. And in this particular situation, we wanted to ensure that when we looked at our regular city positions, that we are continuing to pay within the scope and level of responsibility that each of those positions have. We were able to determine that there were no impacts to our regular city positions. However, we did determine a need to increase our standard temporary wage scale, and as well as the entry-level wages, as well as the higher wages within that temporary scale in order to accommodate the new minimum wage law. We did that by developing a plan for current and future adjustments, and then we made some adjustments to our budget forecast to account for some of the increased costs we anticipate as a result of the legislation. The city works to hire and to remain agile as we respond to the needs of the community and provide services in a cost-effective and sustainable way. One of our strategies for doing that is to have different categories of employees contributing and completing work. Our regular city employees are highly responsible for performing the ongoing work needed to provide our day-to-day services to the community. We also have a small part-time recreation activity group of employees that work alongside our temporary employees. However, they're guaranteed an average of 20 hours per week over the course of the year. Our contingent workforce is extremely important as we respond to either seasonal needs and intermittent needs for work that is not ongoing. And so our temporary employees do accomplish that, as well as our limited duration employees are essential to accomplish some shorter duration projects. Using the actual temporary hours from 2015, this graph illustrates what our temporary employment trends are and our usage of temporary employees throughout the city. You will see that there are some seasonal peaks in both the Public Works and Recreation Department. Recreation and Cultural Services have our highest percentage of temporary employees, with up to 500 temporary employees at any given time working in recreation. You will note that they have a seasonal peak in the June to September summer time frame due to an increase in the seasonal summer offerings. Public Works also has a seasonal peak in the summer and fall time frame to account for the extra work that needs to be done from parks and road maintenance, as well as the fall leaf collection season. I do want to draw your attention to the purple line. That represents the intermittent work and the work that is done throughout the city, throughout the rest of the city departments. And that includes everything from short-term assignments, such as 1 to 2 days or 1 to 2 weeks to backfill for current employees, as well as longer-term assignments to backfill for medical leaves or any sort of career development opportunities for current employees. It also includes special event staffing in our cultural services department, such as usher ticket takers and concession workers. Just to highlight the recreational seasonal peaks, recreation has both the summer seasonal peaks and ongoing work throughout the year. The summer peaks include opening the Amazon pool and an increase in the aquatics department, as well as an increase in youth summer camps and outdoor trips and activities for the entire demographic in our area. Our recreation year-round offerings include everything from ongoing classes such as watercolor classes, fitness classes, outdoor recreation trips, as well as programming for youth in the form of daycare and after-school programs. Over 90% of our recreation staff work less than 500 hours each year. Some work the majority of those hours in the summer, and some work those hours throughout the year as instructors and other employees working in seasonal program or working in the non-seasonal ongoing work. Our recreation offerings are a prime example of the city's desire to maintain a variety of services and programming that is affordable to all of our community members and accessible to all of our community members. One of the advantages of the tiered structure of the minimum wage structure is that it does allow us to plan for what those future increases will be in order to continue to maintain that high level of service in our recreation department as well as our other departments. Again, because we live in Oregon, the public works seasonal pinks of the roads and parks maintenance do need to happen in the summer, and we do have fall leaf collection season that's highly important. Some highlights of our contingent workforce include being able to respond to some of the trends that we're seeing with a number of generations, and in particular the millennials and the baby boomers are often looking for flexible work schedules to accommodate some school schedules as well as post-retirement schedules as well. So we are often an entry-level employer for a number of students as they're going to school, and we're also an employer of a number of people once they've retired and still want to contribute to the community or bridge a wage gap. From an organization standpoint, there are significant advantages to using a contingent workforce. That includes the ability to adjust for fluid and dynamic needs, as well as through our internship programs and our recreation and other divisions that use a high number of temporary employees to really build a long-term pipeline of qualified employees for the future. It's also a much more cost-effective and sustainable way to maintain services throughout the year, and allows us to really attract some highly skilled professionals and instructors doing short-term work. For example, we have some really highly skilled yoga, dance, watercolor instructors that teach on 1 to 2 classes a week basis, and our community has the ability to benefit from that. This slide is just a snapshot of temporary employment pay rates in July of 2016. Using our 2015 data, the average pay rate for a temporary employee was about $13.35 an hour. Our average data in this group is around $13 an hour. Again, those needs do change from year to year, and so the wage structure does change from year to year as well. This group shows that in July of this last year, we had 189 employees working in the entry-level roles that have a minimum wage. Those include entry-level lifeguards as well as recreation activity employees. The 298 employees that are working in the $9.76 to $15 an hour include roles ranging from head lifeguards, instructors, as well as some of the general labor employees that do our seasonal parks and summer parks maintenance and road maintenance in the summer. The $15 an hour and above group includes everything from professionals that are backfilling for current employees, as well as some of the higher technical positions as well. This slide illustrates the difference in the cost of a temporary employee working on some of the seasonal or intermittent work versus the cost of a regular employee at the entry level doing that same amount of work. As you can note, the temporary general labor employee making $14.50 an hour would cost the city about $19,000 over a period of 6 months, whereas a city maintenance worker making $18.50 an hour, which is step one of that wage scale, would cost the city around $38,000 in that same time period. Again, one of our primary things that we needed to do was take a look at this tiered structure of the minimum wage law and anticipate what the future cost impacts would be to the city. As you'll note, there's a relatively low impact in year one. However, that cost impact does increase year over year. You will notice a spike in FY21, and that coincides with the minimum wage increase of 75 cents an hour as opposed to 50 cents an hour. Over the next 6 years, over the life of this through FY23, we anticipate the total adjusted cost that we would need to plan for in our budget forecast is about $1 million over this time frame. We were asked to explore what if the city was interested in moving to a higher minimum wage. And so what we do anticipate with that would be a significant projected cost increase, as well as the need to adjust our collective bargaining agreements and potential adjustments to our supervisory and non-supervisory wage scales in order to avoid salary compression. What we would anticipate is if we were to move a lifeguard to a higher minimum wage, we would need to have the head lifeguard who oversaw their work be a higher wage than that. And again, the supervisor overseeing the work of that team would again need to be at a higher wage. And so there would be some direct cost impacts as well as indirect cost impacts in order to address the salary compression. Using FY17 as an example, this is the difference between if we were to move to $13.50 all at once versus continue to implement the current standard minimum wage increase. So if we were to implement $13.50 all at once, the cost initially would be around $538,000. Again, that is a direct cost impact and does not include the indirect costs of addressing salary compression and other costs beyond that. Again, looking at $15 an hour, if we were to do $15 an hour all at once, the direct cost impact would be around $916,000. So again, one of the things that is helpful about the current tiered structure of that minimum wage increase is that we are able to continue to make sure that we're planning for the future and also ensure that we're continuing to provide services in a cost-effective and sustainable way.
So just to wrap up here and turn it back over to you all, is just that we wanted to highlight, and hopefully we've provided enough information about state legislative changes and the implementation plan moving forward. One of the things that Becky did talk about is the budget impacts, and just want to stress that we have those built into our 6-year financial forecast based on the state legislative changes, and so those are included. Talked a lot about our city temporary employee usage, and happy to answer any additional questions that you may have about that as well. And then just implementation, and then we wanted to run a couple of what-if scenarios to give you an idea if that rate of pay for minimum wage base jumped up at a higher rate, what the impacts would be. One of the things to note about that that might not be completely intuitive is that when you jump to $13.50 an hour or $15 an hour, there are more people that are impacted by that change versus the lower end of the minimum wage scale. So that's the reason for the significant spike. But we'll turn it over to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Betty, anyone else? Claire?
Thank you. I have heard that there's some people who've been working for many years for the city and still getting minimum wage. Is that true? Temporary or part-time or whatever they're called.
So I do know that within our temporary employment structure, once an employee starts at minimum wage, and if they return to the city year over year or work over an amount of time, there is a mechanism for them to receive an increase, a merit increase as they're with the city a longer amount of time. Mm-hmm. So there is a mechanism for that without knowing the specific employee, but I do know that there is a mechanism for increases as temporary employees have a longer tenure with the city.
I don't know the name of I don't know the name of the person or the job. I've just heard from someone who does know or says he knows. And then you say it's going to affect other people other than the ones whose wages go up. Is that because you mean they need to make more than the person below them?
That is correct.
Why is that necessarily true? It seems to me that everyone who does a job deserves decent pay, and that the fact that someone who used to make less is going to make as much as you doesn't necessarily mean that you need more to pay more.
Well, our pay rates are based on the level and scope of responsibility for particular positions. And in general, our temporary employees don't have the same level of responsibility. And so we construct our pay scales to reflect that. And so if there were adjustments to the base of our temporary wages, we would have to make sure that we were adequately compensating those with greater responsibilities. That could be lead worker, supervisor, or just a different level of classification.
Give them a new name.
I'm sorry.
Give them a new name.
Oh.
Thank you.
Claire?
So I had a couple of questions and then some comments. When you talked about implementing the current state law and you said there had to be adjustments made to contingent position wages, was that something that had to be changed immediately, or is that a future change?
Both. We did change the wage scales immediately to accommodate the law in July for all of our temporary positions, and then we established a mechanism to continue to move that entire wage scale up as minimum wage increases as well.
So that means we had employees who were earning less than $9.75 an hour before the law changed.
That is correct.
Okay. And you mentioned something that made it sound like we use contingent workers for ongoing non-seasonal work. Is that correct?
So the ongoing work in recreation, for example, would be a good example of that. So we do have class instructors that will teach 1 to 2 classes a week throughout the course of the year. We also have usher ticket takers and concession workers that also work and staff special events as they happen throughout the year.
So if you know you're scheduling these instructors for the year, why are they contingent workers and not city staff?
I believe the demand for the specific levels of instruction is not full-time for each instructor. For example, I don't believe there's a demand for full-time specific dance instructors or yoga instructors throughout the course of the year. There's a lower demand to allow us to schedule them.
So it's not necessarily a single individual who's in that contingent position? Is that what you're saying?
It could be multiple individuals that are teaching different classes at different times. And so the hours that the contingent workforce that are teaching some of those classes are working a lot less hours than what even one of our standard part-time employees would be working. You know, Becky talked a little bit about the example of the recreation activity instructors, the RAIs, and talked about that they average about 20 hours a week. That would be on the higher level in terms of people that are teaching classes. And so it's a specific need for a limited amount of time. And so some people are interested in continuing on and continuing to teach those classes while some may change out. So.
And then on these charts that you showed us of the cost impact where we go to 1350 or 15, you said that was just the wage, not other impacts. Is that just strictly the wage and not benefits included in that number that you gave us?
It is the amount needed to bring somebody from the current wage to what the minimum of that wage is, and includes fringe calculations on top of that.
So it's not just what they would get in their salary.
Correct.
And then when we use contingent workers, are we doing that through a contract with a temp agency that supplies those workers?
We have 3 different ways that we do that. We hire city temps, primarily in our recreation and Larks division. We hire temporary employees as city temps. We can also do that in other parts of the city as well, so they're on the city's payroll. We also use outside contractors, Galt and Quantum, to be able to have them provide the contracted employees to us at a rate that we negotiate with them.
So. Yeah. Well, I appreciate this data. It's kind of a lot to absorb, and obviously, as a city, we are responsible to balance our costs with our revenues and be as responsible as we can with that, and that's an ongoing challenge. But I also think we need to be honest about the impact we have on how we pay and utilize our workers. I feel when we rely on contingent workers, particularly if we hire them through another agency, we're kind of offloading our responsibility for those workers. They can be in a very vulnerable position depending on who that employer is, because the city is not their employer. So they may not have the same level of protections in the workplace that they would have if they were directly employed by the city. And I think that needs to be understood. And I also, I understand your framing, but I think it can be a mistake to frame our use of contingent workers as a benefit to those workers. Now, certainly the skilled professional who comes in to teach a Pilates class and has a number of venues where they do that work, that can make some sense. But we know there are many people in our community who are working 2 or 3 jobs who would prefer to have a single job with the hours and wages that they can use to sustain their family. And as a major employer in the city, I think we have a responsibility to, demonstrate best practices when it comes to taking care of our workforce and our community. So that was part of the reason I asked for this work session, was to raise these questions. I don't necessarily have a motion for today, but I would like us to continue this conversation in the future.
Other questions? Yes. Oh, Mike, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. On our page 6 of the presentation, at the bottom there, of the 600 temporary employees with those 3 rate categories, what percentage of those 600 are Public Works, Parks employees, roughly?
There would be about roughly 80 to 100 employees. So in any given year, but I would need to double check to give you an accurate number.
So 1/6 of them or something like it. Okay. One of the things that I think we should all be thinking about is reflected in this, in that we heard recently from Parks that they are suggesting to us that we go out for a levy or a bond for Parks Department needs, specifically around maintenance. I think we read recently that while the number of employees they've had has maintained at the same level over the last several years, their departmental employee costs have gone up, what was it, 21, 22%, something like that over the course of the last couple of years?
I don't know the answer to that.
That was a Guard article here the other day. So what I saw projected there with the changes in minimum wage, with at least 100 folks that are in the temporary, can you extrapolate and tell me what we're likely to see as far as employee costs without adding any new employees to be able to do any new maintenance, what we're going to see as increases over the next several years in Parks, just with the number of employees we have?
We don't have that broken out by Public Works or Recreation Services, but we could definitely provide that to you. The one thing I would say is that of the information that we shared about the cost increases, about 76% of those costs, or 3/4, are general fund related costs. And so it kind of depends on the nature of the position and the work that they're doing, because road fund type work wouldn't be in the general fund. And so, there's still a growth cost, but.
Right. But the park stuff would be, and that's kind of a little bit more what I was talking about with this. It would seem to me as though, extrapolated it seems like our costs are going, for employees in parks, are going to continue to rise at a fairly good clip, while not being able to have any more folks on the job to do any more park maintenance than we've been able to do so far. Thank you.
We can certainly provide that, Councilor.
I'd love to know that. Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments? I do have a question, which one of the things that I hear from people a lot is this question about why should someone who's a high school kid or a college kid, need the same wage as someone who's supporting a family? And I'm assuming that a lot of those summer lifeguards are younger people who may not have the same responsibilities. And I don't know, as an employer, if there's any way of like teasing that out, or if that's even appropriate. You know, you referred to these as starter jobs, so is there a way of looking at that differently?
Well, I think there's just a wide range of opportunities, and we value all different demographics of our workforce, especially our temporary workforce, because they provide such a valuable service to the community. And so I think, you know, part of it is just where the rate of pay is set for the level of responsibility of those positions, and making sure that we're managing that in the way that meets not our organizational needs, but the employee needs as well. And we try to be really mindful of that. One of the things that we do every year is that we build in some sort of an inflation adjustment to make sure that we're keeping pace with changes for cost of living and things like that. The one thing that I would add also, I think Councilor Syret touched on this, is that one of the things that is such a huge benefit, not only to the temporary employees working with the city, but to the organization, is that there's such a pipeline created. If the LRCS director, Renee Gruby, were sitting here, she would rattle off story after story about the success in hiring people that have gotten experience and exposure and said, yes, I want to work for the city of Eugene, and have a high level of excitement in doing so. And so there's just such a broad array of needs that we're trying to meet from an organizational perspective as well as a community perspective. And I wouldn't be able to make a judgment call on your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think our goal is that we want families to earn family wage jobs. And that's sort of where we're going with this. Betty, and then Emily.
Thank you. I think there's something to be said for starter people who are just learning to work with their first jobs. People who work at a car wash and do a really good job and are learning. But I'm really concerned when you talk about supporting families. That's the argument that was used for a long time to pay women less than men. I worked for the telephone company once as a service representative, and I found out that the men who worked there were making almost twice as much as I was, and their title was business representative, but they did the same work. And when I questioned someone about that, they said, but they have to support their families. And that just raises something in me anytime someone says people who have to support families. And also, if you go on at a low wage year after year after year, that's not right. It's not the same as somebody who's 17 years old and is just learning to do a job. And I could see a point of maybe those people getting less money, but not forever. Thank you.
Emily?
My comment, thank you, Mayor, is in line with Betty's. I think that we should pay people for the work that they're doing, and certainly entry-level jobs would pay less than really experienced jobs. But I would just be appalled that we would put a pay level with what somebody's personal life is. You just can't say, well, you're married and have children, so you get $5 more than a high school student. I can't see us going there. Thank you.
That wasn't really the intent of my comment. My comment really had to do with kind of age and dependency status, but I take your point. I take your point. Any other comments? I think we don't have anything that we need to confirm today, so we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.